The massive starship hung silently above the research colony, its metallic hull gleaming like a predator waiting to strike. Yoon Park, a 12-year-old girl with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, watched through the window of her family's living quarters. Something felt wrong. The stars seemed too quiet, the usually bustling research station too still. Her father, Dr. Park, was checking equipment when the first plasma burst cut through the outer shields. Alarms screamed. Metal walls vibrated with the intensity of incoming destruction. Yoon's mother grabbed her hand, pulling her towards the emergency shelter. But they never made it. Alien soldiers moved with impossible speed. Their bodies were like living metal, part organic, part machine. Smooth exoskeletons shifted and rippled, absorbing light and sound. Their weapons didn't shoot traditional projectiles. Instead, they released neural disruptors that froze humans in place, conscious but completely immobilized. Yoon watched her parents fall, not with bullets or blood, but with a strange blue energy that wrapped around them like frozen lightning. She knew these were the Imperium soldiers, creatures her parents had spoken about in hushed conversations. Beings who collected intelligent species like children collected rare rocks. Subject located, a mechanical voice announced. Not a voice exactly, more like a sound that translated directly into understanding. Genetic potential, exceptional. Two massive figures approached her. Their hands weren't hands. They were intricate mechanical appendages that could reshape themselves instantly. One touched her forehead. She felt no pain, just a cold sensation of being examined. The research colony, once a beacon of human, scientific exploration, became a graveyard of frozen moments. Scientists, technicians, even maintenance workers, all suspended in that strange blue energy. Yoon realized they were being collected, like specimens in a bizarre galactic museum. Her mind raced. She had heard stories about the Imperium, how they viewed lesser civilizations as research subjects, how they didn't consider other species truly sentient, how they broke down intelligent life into mathematical probabilities and genetic potential. The alien that touched her head tilted its mechanical body. Something in its movement suggested curiosity, not compassion, not emotion, just pure clinical interest. Genetic markers indicate advanced neurological potential, another voice translated, recommended for advanced cognitive testing. Yoon was lifted, not roughly, not gently, just efficiently, like a package being moved from one storage unit to another. Her small body seemed insignificant against the massive alien technology surrounding her. The ship's interior was unlike anything human engineering could imagine. Surfaces shifted, walls breathed, corridors restructured themselves with each movement. Light didn't come from sources. It simply existed, everywhere and nowhere. They placed her in a chamber, not a cell, not a room, something in between. Transparent, walls that weren't really walls. Surfaces that responded to thought more than touch. She could see other chambers, other captured humans, some older, some younger, all suspended in a state between consciousness and sleep. Days became meaningless. Time was measured not in hours, but in experimental sequences. They tested her reflexes, her mental capabilities, her ability to adapt. Each test was more complex than the last. Each test pushed her beyond what she thought was possible. The Imperium didn't see her as a child. They saw her as a complex algorithm, a set of potential responses, a living problem to be solved and understood. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't understand, was the human capacity for adaptation, for resistance, for survival. Yoon Park looked around her new environment. She was 12 years old, captured, isolated, alone, and she was just getting started. The first phase of her unexpected journey had begun. The Imperium thought they had collected another specimen. They had no idea they had just made the biggest mistake of their galactic existence. In the cold, shifting environment of their research vessel, a young human child began to plan her revenge. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with the calm, calculated intelligence that would become her most powerful weapon. The abduction was complete. But the real story was just beginning. The experimental chamber hummed with soft blue energy. Chun Park sat motionless, her eyes tracking every microscopic movement around her. The Imperium researchers believed they were studying her, but with each passing test, she was studying them more carefully. Their neural probes were sophisticated, designed to map and understand alien brain patterns. What they didn't realize was how quickly Yoon's brain could adapt. Each probe revealed more than it extracted. She learned their technological language, not through traditional communication but through pure neural mapping. Days blended into weeks. The aliens ran complex tests, believing they were breaking her mental defenses. They inserted complex neural interfaces expecting to find weakness. Instead, Yoon's brain began creating its own communication network. She discovered she could feel the ship's systems, not just see them but understand their fundamental communication patterns. The chamber walls weren't just walls. They were massive communication networks. Data streams flowed like invisible rivers. Hun learned to read these streams, understanding how the Imperium's technology communicated. Her 12-year-old brain, considered primitive by their standards, was actually performing calculations they couldn't comprehend. During one particular test, an alien researcher noticed something unusual. Yoon's neural response wasn't just reactive, it was adaptive. When they increased test complexity, her brain didn't just respond, it restructured itself. Like water finding new paths through rock, her mind created alternative neural pathways. Anomaly detected, the mechanical voice announced, but Yoon was already several steps ahead. She discovered she could send microscopic signals through the ship's communication network. Not messages exactly, but subtle disruptions. Like a perfect dancer moving between laser sensors, she learned to communicate without being detected. The Imperium had strict protocols. Every system was monitored, every response calculated. But they had a fundamental weakness. They believed in perfect control. They couldn't imagine that a human child could outsmart their advanced technology. Yoon began collecting information. Small pieces, tiny fragments. Each test, each probe, each neural examination gave her more understanding. She mapped their communication protocols. She learned their technological vulnerabilities. She understood how their ships communicated. Her resistance wasn't about fighting. It was about understanding, about adaptation. The other captured humans in nearby chambers looked broken, defeated. But Yoon saw opportunity. While they saw walls, she saw communication networks. While they saw limitations, she saw potential pathways. One particular alien researcher became her primary observer. Tall, mechanical, always watching, always testing. What it didn't know was that Yoon was testing it right back. Every movement, every reaction. She was building a comprehensive understanding of their psychological and technological systems. Her mind worked like a complex computer, processing, analyzing, reconstructing. The neural probes that were meant to control her were actually teaching her their most advanced technologies. Sometimes she would catch a glimpse of her reflection, a small human child surrounded by massive alien technology. But her eyes held something the aliens couldn't comprehend: pure, calculated intelligence. The ship moved through space, massive, silent, filled with captured humans who had surrendered. But in one small chamber, a 12-year-old girl was planning something extraordinary. She wasn't just resisting, she was preparing. Her first encrypted message was simple, just a microscopic signal sent through the ship's communication network. A signal so small, so perfectly crafted, that it would be invisible to their monitoring systems. To the human resistance, it would be a beacon of hope. To the Imperium, it would be the first crack in their perfect system. Yoon Park smiled. Not a child's smile, but the smile of someone who understood that true resistance wasn't about fighting. It was about understanding, about adaptation. The silent resistance had begun, and the Imperium had no idea what was coming. The first signal was barely a whisper, a microscopic pulse of data that traveled through the Imperium's communication networks like a ghost. But for the human resistance, it was everything. Yoon's carefully constructed message revealed critical weaknesses in the alien systems, coordinates of research stations, communication protocol vulnerabilities, detailed maps of ship defense mechanisms. Each piece of information was a weapon more powerful than any traditional military strategy. Human resistance leaders gathered in a hidden base deep within an asteroid belt. They studied Yoon's encrypted transmissions, fragments of intelligence that seemed impossible to have been collected by a single child. Some called it a miracle. Others recognized it as something more, pure human adaptability. The first strike came without warning. 3 Imperium research stations went dark simultaneously, not destroyed, not attacked, simply disconnected. Their communication networks collapsed from within, like a body turning against its own immune system. Imperium command centers erupted in chaos. Their perfect technological infrastructure, built over thousands of years of galactic domination, suddenly became their greatest weakness. The very systems they used to control and monitor became conduits of their own destruction. Resistance ships moved with surgical precision. Each attack was calculated, each movement predicted by the intelligence Yoon had slowly, meticulously gathered. They weren't fighting a traditional war. They were dismantling a technological empire from its core. The alien leadership couldn't understand what was happening. Their advanced predictive algorithms failed. Their monitoring systems became unreliable. It was as if an invisible force was rewriting their entire technological existence. In her chamber, Yoon continued her silent work. Each neural probe, each test, became another opportunity to understand and exploit. The aliens believed they were studying her. In reality, she was studying them with a depth they could never comprehend. Human special forces began targeting specific Imperium facilities, not random attacks. Precise strikes based on Yoon's intelligence, communication relays, research centers, technological hubs. Each location fell with minimal resistance. The most shocking element was the speed. The Imperium had dominated countless civilizations. They had technological superiority that made human technology look primitive. But they had never encountered an enemy that could adapt as quickly as humanity. Resistance communication channels buzzed with excitement. The child, they would say, the girl who broke their system. Yoon became more than a person. She became a symbol of human potential. The Imperium's leadership began to fracture. Their perfect hierarchical system couldn't process the rapid changes. Blame became their primary communication. Each leader accused another of weakness, of failure, of being outsmarted by a species they had considered insignificant. Yoon watched through the ship's neural network, not with anger, not with revenge, but with a cold, calculated understanding of what was happening. She was rewriting the rules of engagement, showing that true power wasn't about technology. It was about adaptation. More signals went out, more vulnerabilities exposed. The resistance moved like a living organism, using the very technological infrastructure the Imperium had built to control the galaxy. Some captured humans began to change. Inspired by Yoon's resistance, they started finding their own ways to fight. Small acts of defiance, subtle disruptions. The seeds of rebellion that Yoon had planted began to grow. The Imperium had a fatal weakness. They believed in perfect control, in predictable systems, in technological superiority. They couldn't imagine that their most significant threat would come from a single human child. As ship after ship fell, as communication networks collapsed, as their perfect system began to crumble, one thing became clear. Humanity was no longer just surviving. They were fighting back. And Yoon Park was leading the charge. The rebellion had truly ignited. The galaxy watched as humanity transformed from a seemingly defeated species to a strategic nightmare for the Imperium. Yoon Park, now 15, had become more than just a child. She was a living weapon of psychological warfare. Her story spread through communication networks faster than any traditional message. Not a tale of violence, but of pure, calculated resistance. Every captured human now looked at their captors differently. Hope replaced fear. Strategy replaced submission. The Imperium's communication channels began to change. Their perfect, controlled messaging started showing cracks. Reports of human resistance were no longer simple statistics. They became stories of impossible adaptability. Resistance. Broadcasts showed Yoon's journey. Not as propaganda, but as a clinical demonstration of human potential. Each transmission revealed how a single child could dismantle a technological empire. The message was clear. Humanity was not just a species to be controlled. Imperium leadership began experiencing something they had never encountered: psychological breakdown. Their predictive algorithms failed. Their control mechanisms collapsed. For the first time in their galactic history, they felt something close to fear. Captured human research facilities became centers of unexpected resistance. Humans started using the Imperium's own technological systems against them. Communication networks became battlegrounds of information and psychological manipulation. UN's neural mapping techniques spread among captured humans. They learned to read technological systems, to understand communication patterns, to create microscopic disruptions that would grow into massive systemic failures. The psychological impact was devastating. The Imperium had always viewed humans as a primitive species, suitable for labor, for research, for collection. Now they saw something entirely different, a species that could turn their own technology into a weapon. Resistance leaders used Yoon's intelligence to create targeted psychological operations. They didn't just attack physical infrastructure. They attacked the Imperium's fundamental belief system. Their sense of technological superiority began to crumble. Communication networks became battlegrounds, not of traditional warfare, but of pure psychological manipulation. Humans inserted subtle messages, disrupted communication protocols, created confusion within the Imperium's perfect system. The most powerful weapon was information. Eon had shown that true resistance wasn't about destruction. It was about understanding, about adaptation, about turning the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. Imperium leadership began to fracture. Blame became their primary communication. Each leader accused another of weakness, of failing to understand the human threat. Their perfect hierarchical system started showing massive internal conflicts. Captured humans in research facilities began small acts of resistance, subtle disruptions, microscopic changes in technological systems. What seemed like minor actions became massive systemic failures. Hun watched through the neural networks, not with anger, not with revenge, but with a calculated understanding of psychological warfare. She was showing the galaxy that true power wasn't about technology. It was about intelligence, about adaptation. The Imperium's communication systems became a battlefield. Every transmission became a potential weapon. Every communication channel a potential point of failure. Humans had transformed from a collected species to a psychological nightmare. Resistance. Broadcasts showed something unprecedented. Humans weren't just fighting. They were outsmarting. They were adapting. They were turning the Imperium's technological superiority into its greatest weakness. The galaxy watched in shock. A species that was supposed to be defeated was now rewriting the rules of engagement, not through traditional warfare, but through pure calculated intelligence. Yoon Park became more than a person. She became a symbol, a demonstration of human potential, a living proof that true resistance wasn't about physical strength. It was about understanding, about adaptation. The psychological warfare had begun, and the Imperium was losing. Humanity was no longer just a species to be controlled. They were a force to be understood, and they were just getting started. The final assault began without traditional warning. No massive fleets, no thunderous explosions. Just a precise, calculated dismantling of the Imperium's entire technological infrastructure. Yoon Park stood on the human flagship's bridge, her 15-year-old frame small, but her presence enormous. Around her, specialized human teams prepared for the most critical mission in galactic history. Their target, the Imperium's Central Communication Core. Human resistance had spent years preparing. Every piece of intelligence, every microscopic signal Eon had sent, had led to this moment. The Imperium's technological superiority was about to become its ultimate weakness. The first wave wasn't an attack. It was a complete technological shutdown. Communication networks collapsed. Defense systems turned against themselves. Massive starships became nothing more than floating metal containers, their advanced systems suddenly rendered useless. Imperium leadership watched in horror. Their perfect systems, built over thousands of years of galactic domination, crumbled like sand. Not through brute force, but through pure, calculated intelligence. Yoon's neural interface connected with the human fleet's primary systems. She wasn't just commanding. She was becoming the central intelligence. Her mind moved faster than any computer, predicting and countering the Imperium's defensive protocols. Resistance ships moved with impossible precision, each movement calculated, each attack a surgical strike that dismantled the Imperium's core infrastructure. They weren't destroying. They were systematically removing the Imperium's ability to function. The Central Imperium Command Station, a massive technological marvel that had controlled multiple star systems, began to break down. Not from external attacks, but from internal communication failures. The very systems they had used to control other species now turned against them. Captured humans across multiple research facilities began their synchronized resistance. Small actions, microscopic disruptions, each movement carefully coordinated through the neural networks Yoon had developed. The Imperium leadership tried to communicate, to negotiate, but humanity had moved beyond traditional diplomacy. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of galactic interaction. Specialized human teams infiltrated critical Imperium systems, not with weapons but with advanced neural interfaces. They didn't just enter systems, they became the systems. Transforming technological infrastructure from within, Yoon watched the central holographic display. Entire Imperium communication networks collapsed, defense systems failed, technological strongholds crumbled. Not through destruction, but through pure, calculated intelligence. The most shocking element was the precision. Humanity didn't seek total destruction. They sought complete systemic transformation. The Imperium would survive, but never again as a controlling force. Resistance broadcasts showed something unprecedented. This wasn't just a victory. It was a fundamental restructuring of galactic power dynamics. Humans had shown that true strength wasn't about technological superiority. It was about adaptation, about intelligence. The final moments came with surprising calmness. The Imperium leadership, once considered unbreakable, now sat in complete silence. Their perfect systems had become their ultimate vulnerability. Yoon's voice came through the communication systems, not angry, not vengeful, just calm and calculated. "Your control is over," she announced. A simple statement that would reshape galactic history. Imperium leaders were given a choice: complete surrender, total system transformation, strict protocols, preventing future expansionist behaviors. Humanity would oversee their restructuring. The galaxy watched in shock. A species once considered primitive had completely dismantled the most advanced technological civilization in known space, not through violence, but through pure, calculated intelligence. As the last Imperium communication systems went dark, something new emerged, a different kind of galactic order. One where adaptation, not control, would be the primary rule. Yoon Park looked out at the stars. The child who had been captured, who had been tortured, who had been considered nothing more than a research specimen. She had just changed everything. The retribution was complete. Humanity had risen.